it's Monday and still not a Percy Day. But hopefully Percy Day is getting closer.
Oh, it is. I'm going to make it Percy.
May 6th. And let's see, day of service coming up Friday. We only have 2 normal days this week, which is today and Thursday. Today we'll do reading stuff. Friday's not a normal day. It's day of service. Tomorrow is back to NWEA. Wednesday, NWEA. And from there, Kings Island slips for those of you doing Honor Society. I think we're down to about 20 spots left.
Dang!
Thanks. If you are interested, get those in, and then we should be good to go. And I think that covers it there. So, with the introduction of Princess Bride, that last bit where he...
Exactly the reason why you
realize that his dad only read the
good parts.
So, that is why the actual full Morgenstern Princess Bride is close to 1,000 pages, and this one's not close to 1,000 pages.
Oh, so this is like the good part, bro?
This is the good parts version. So, Goldman cuts out all of the long, boring parts.
Wait, we're supposed to read the...
Oh my good God, I can charge you points now, or just thank you.
They're disrespecting me.
I know, because you keep talking while I am. I would disrespect you also. Hi, welcome back to Monday. What a day we're having already. So again, he cut out all of what he said the boring parts were, which is why when we get into book, there's going to be huge chunks of it cut out. And then Goldman is going to have big parts of it where he is talking throughout the book, explaining those parts he cut out. So if I skip intro, those parts of book get real confusing, because we'll get to like chapter 3. I think chapter 3 is all of one page, or I think chapter 4 is all of one page. One of them is all of one page because he cut out the entire thing. I know chapter 2's been cut down, same thing with 3. Like a lot of these got cut down tremendously from what they were originally. Chapter 5 is almost not any part cut down, and so on and so forth as we go through. But that's the main part. Summer.
What was the point of making the introduction like 26 pages?
It's chapter 4.
Goldman tends to talk a lot.
Like, we didn't need to know about this.
The back, well, yes and no, because as we get into the book, he is going to make references to a lot of those things, and how, because Princess Bride impacted so much of his life, he makes references in his little things where he cuts out, and he'll make little connections
Why
to
do we
them.
need to know about like the...
I was minding my business. Reading.
The Sandy Sterling.
Yeah.
You have an attitude.
I'm assuming a lot of that is to let you know that, yeah, I have no idea. I was trying to find a good reason for him on that one, but yeah. I mean, the beginning part when he was a kid makes sense, because that was him hating to read and then getting connected to reading. But the Sandy Sterling part, I think, is just him being a weird man. It happens.
He dislikes his wife.
And apparently, and...
Yes, and the last 3 pages she said he doesn't like really love anything.
No.
Except-
Well, at the very end, you'll find out he has a conclusion part where he comes in again and they're no longer together. It's not really a spoiler. Yes. Read.
Are we supposed to like read the rest of the introduction?
Yeah.
Alright. So let's begin, now that you guys have read the introduction on your own. All 5 responsible kids.
Wait, what page?
I did it.
That's more than
I wasn't calling out who may or may not have been responsible.
I may have read it
I was
2
just
minutes ago.
put it out there to try and help
But
you.
it's done.
Crawford knows I read it.
Yeah.
I've watched the reading brief.
I read it.
I literally did.
You literally.
I was sitting right here and I read it. I
Chapter
read it like
1.
literally 2 minutes.
So, again, to remind you as we get into chapter 1, this part, this is going to be both historical fiction. We're going to get into the background of Florin and Gilder, the 2 countries that are the main part of it, but it is going to be him making fun of things to start off with. So, Florin and Gilder, they're no longer in existence. Yay, Europe, and the fact that things change all the time there. But at one point, they were up in this area. So, have you guys ever seen...
Wait, is that Ant-Man?
Oh my god, he's so hot. He is the...
Ant-Man is not fine. Ant-Man is not fine. Ant-Man is like...
That's my husband up there.
Which one?
We're married.
Also, that would be Killmonger, I believe.
And my husband.
That's what I thought.
Oh my gosh, the whole run is ugly. Oh my god.
And Creed.
Last time I talked to
Actually,
him, he
Chop
said he
Up.
doesn't care, so it's okay. So up here, the book is going to start off referencing this and the fact that people who have apparently, not necessarily people, but magazines and important rich people have always been talking about who the most important, attractive person is.
Michael
So,
B. Jordan.
Apparently Michael B. Jordan,
It is.
future Manosby. And so the
Alright.
book is going to start off
Why do you
with
put Ryan Reynolds on?
giving background to this. This will make sense in a moment. I'm just putting it up there.
He's second.
I didn't realize putting a hunky fellows was going to be that distracting.
No, you should put
Oh
Ryan
my gosh, you
Reynolds.
put Ryan Reynolds.
Why do you use an EU map?
Ay, ay, ay. All right.
Start charging points.
Why do you use a European map?
Because you wanted to.
Bro.
Why not? Do you not like the European Union?
No, but that's just weird. Why would you
I
use
hate
that
Europe.
one?
It's not your
Alright.
opinion.
So we're going to get into our first character, which is Buttercup, who is a hottie. But she was not born a hottie. She was born a bit of a normal or an uggo. And then she slowly adjusted to become a hot. You'll figure it out.
Like the girl from Summer I Turned Pretty.
Yeah. The year that Buttercup was born, the most beautiful woman in the world was a French scullery maid named Annette. Oh, a scullery maid, I looked this up also. If you've seen Cinderella, that's what a scullery maid was. They had like sit there and scrub the ground.
Who's Buttercup?
We haven't gotten there yet. That's what we're trying to get to.
My bad.
Was a French scullery maid named Annette. Annette worked in Paris for the Duke and Duchess de Guiche, and it did not escape the Duke's notice that someone extraordinary was polishing the pewter. The Duke's notice did not escape the notice of the Duchess either, who was not very beautiful and not very rich, but plenty smart. The Duchess set about studying Annette and shortly found her adversary's tragic flaw: chocolate. Armed now, the Duchess set to work. The Palace de Guiche turned into a candy castle. Everywhere you looked, bonbons. There were piles of chocolate-covered mints in the drawing rooms, baskets of chocolate-covered nougats in the parlors. Annette never had a chance. Inside of a season, she went from delicate to whopping, and the Duke never glanced in her direction without sad bewilderment clouding his eyes. Annette, it might be noted, seemed only cheerier throughout her enlargement. She eventually married the pastry chef, and they both ate a lot until old age claimed them. Things, it might also be noted, did not fare so cheerily for the Duchess. The Duke, for reasons passing understanding, next became smitten with his very own mother-in-law, which caused the Duchess ulcers. Only they didn't have ulcers yet. More precisely, ulcers existed, people had them, but they weren't called ulcers. The medical profession at that time called them stomach pains, and felt the best cure was coffee dolloped with brandy twice a day until the pain subsided. The Duchess took her mixture faithfully, watching through the years as her husband and her mother blew kisses at each other behind her back. Not surprisingly, the Duchess's grumpiness became legendary, as Voltaire has so aptly chronicled, except this was before Voltaire. I now have a connection. When you guys asked why did Goldman do that babbling at the beginning, it made sense as soon as you asked that. Where did Goldman learn to love writing from?
Dad.
Not from his dad.
Oh.
Oh, his teacher.
From this book. Remember, he hated reading and writing until this book was read to him. And you asked me, why does Goldman babble at the beginning? Because that's what Morgenstern does. The whole beginning part of this first intro is him giving you a babbly background before we even get to the first character, which I've never thought about before until you guys just asked that question. Apparently, Goldman did the same thing. Before he got to his actual point, he did like a babbly background thing. So apparently, he learned his writing style from Goldman. It's from Morgenstern. Words. Yes.
Same thing happened with Miss Melon. She kept saying words. So, just a question. Did you actually read the actual Princess Bride, the 1,000 pages?
No, I do not have a copy of it. This is the only version I've read. After we get through this one, I have no desire to read the long
Is it
one.
expensive?
Probably. I don't have. According to Menashe, yes. Her future husband has not picked it up for her yet.
Yes, he has.
Oh, never mind. He already got her copy. The year Buttercup turned 10, the most beautiful woman lived in Bengal, the daughter of a successful tea merchant. This girl's name was Eleuthera, and her skin was of a dusky perfection unseen in India for 80 years. There have only been 11 perfect complexions in all of India since accurate accounting began. Eleuthera was 19 the year the pox plague hit Bengal. The girl survived, even if her skin did not. So on the front cover, that girl, that's Buttercup, the one we're getting into. So we're giving a whole bunch of background on, as Buttercup got older, who the most beautiful girl was, because eventually Buttercup's going to take that top spot. Much like when Osby's husband eventually took the top spot for hottest dude on People magazine.
He is.
And obviously.
Yeah.
Same thing with
You
Buttercup.
stay away
She's
from my
raising
man.
up with it.
You stay away from my man.
When Buttercup was
Yeah,
15, Adela Terrell of Sussex on the Thames was easily the most beautiful creature. Adela was 20, and so far did she outdistance the world that it seemed certain she would be the most beautiful for many, many years. But then one day, one of her suitors, she had 104 of them. Do you guys know what a suitor is?
Yeah, it's someone who's like trying to marry you.
There you go. Suitors are dudes that are trying to ask you out.
That doesn't look like a dude.
Well, the one in the middle's not. That's the one being asked out.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
You just read faster.
I'm trying, but there's part I have to explain.
Yeah, but no, like you read so slow. Like
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Everyone
Like-
in here is kind of
like
petty.
that night alone, like just like that night alone in her room, she could
Try. Sorry, this is my reading cadence.
No, it's
Mr.
very,
Rubik,
it's
I
very
like the way
slow.
you read.
But then one day, one of her suitors, she had 104 of them, exclaimed that without question, Adela must be one of the most ideal items, must be the most ideal item yet spawned. Adela, flattered, began to ponder on the truth of that statement. That night, alone in her room, she examined herself pore by pore in her mirror. This was after mirrors. It took her until close to dawn to finish her inspection. But by that time, it was clear to her that the young man had been quite correct in his assessment. She was, through no real faults of her own, perfect. As she strolled through the family rose gardens, watching the sunrise, she felt happier than she'd ever been. Not only am I perfect, she said to herself, I am probably the first perfect person in the whole long history of the universe. Not a part of me could need stand improving. How lucky I am to be perfect and rich and sought after and sensitive and young and young. The mist was rising around her as Adela began to think. Well, of course, I'll always be sensitive, she thought, and I'll always be rich, but I don't quite see how I'm going to manage to always be young. And when I'm not young, how am I going to stay perfect? And if I'm not perfect, well, what else is there? What indeed? Adela furrowed her brow in desperate thought. It was the first time in her life her brow had ever had to furrow. And Adela gasped when she realized what she had done, horrified that she had somehow damaged it, perhaps permanently. She rushed back to her mirror and spent the morning, and although she managed to convince herself that she was still quite as perfect as ever, there was no question that she was not quite as happy as she had been. She had begun to fret. The first worry lines appeared within a fortnight, the first wrinkles within a month, and before the year was out, creases abounded. She married soon thereafter the selfsame man who accused her of sublimity and gave him merry hell for many years. Buttercup, of course, at 15, knew none of this, and if she had, would have found it totally unfathomable. How could someone care if she were the most beautiful woman in the world or not? What difference could it have made if you were only the third most beautiful or the sixth? Buttercup at this time was nowhere near that high, being barely in the top 20, and that primarily on potential, certainly not on any particular care she took of herself. She hated to wash her face. She loathed the area behind her ears. She was sick of combing her hair and did so as little as possible. What she liked to do, preferred above all else really, was to ride her horse and taunt the farm boy. The horse's name was Horse. Buttercup was never long on imagination, and it came when she called it, went where she steered it, did what she told it. The farm boy did what she told him. too. Actually, he was more a young man now, but he'd been a farm boy when, orphaned, he had come to work for her father. And Buttercup referred to him that way still. "Farm boy, fetch me this. Get me that, farm boy. Quickly, lazy thing. Trot now, or I'll tell father." "As you wish." That was all he ever answered. "As you wish." "Fetch that, farm boy." "As you wish." "Dry this, farm boy." "As you wish." He lived in a hovel out near the animals, and according to Buttercup's mother, he kept it clean. He even read when he had candles. I'll leave the lad an acre in my will," Buttercup's father was fond of saying. They had acres then. "You'll spoil him," Buttercup's mother always answered. "He's slaved for many years. Hard work should be rewarded." Then, rather than continue the argument, they had arguments then too, they would both turn on their daughter. "You didn't bathe," her father said. "Oh, I did. "Not with water," her father continued. "You reek like a stallion." "I've been riding all day." "You must bathe, Buttercup," her mother joined in. "The boys don't like their girls to smell of stables." "Oh, the boys!" Buttercup fairly exploded. "I do not care about the boys. Horse loves me, and that is quite sufficient. Thank you." She said that speech loud, and she said it often. But, like it or not, things were beginning to happen. Shortly after her 16th birthday, Buttercup realized that it had now been more than a month since any girl in the village had spoken to her. She had never much been close to girls, so the change was nothing sharp, but at least before there were head nods exchanged when she rode through the village or along the cart tracks. But now, for no reason, there was nothing. A quick glance away as she approached, that was all. Buttercup cornered Cornelia one morning at the blacksmith's and asked about the silence. "I should think after what you'd done, you'd have the courtesy not to pretend to ask," came from Cornelia. "What have I done?" What? "You've stolen them." With that, Cornelia fled. But Buttercup understood. She knew who them was. The boys. The village boys. The beef-witted, feather-brained, rattle-skulled, clod-pated, dim-domed, noodle-noggined, sap-headed, lunk-knobbed boys. How could anybody accuse her of stealing them? Why would anybody want them anyway? What good were they? All they did was pester and vex and annoy. "Can I brush your horse, Buttercup?" "Thank you, but the farm boy does that." "Can I go riding with you, Buttercup?" "Thank you, but I really do enjoy myself alone." "You think you're too good for anybody, don't you, Buttercup?" No, I don't. I just like riding by myself, that's all." Quick pause. "Do you know what the boys are doing with her?"
Harassing, catcalling.
"No, not catcalling. But you're right, they were flirting with her. Is she aware they're flirting with her?" No, she's completely clueless. Does she care about the boys?
Not really.
No. Do the other girls in town care about the boys? And that's where the issue comes in. She's the hottie, but could care less about all the boys. All the boys care about her, and she could care less about them. So sort of like Aphrodite in a way. So from there, that's the problem, is she's not good at flirting whatsoever. But throughout her 16th year, even this kind of talk gave way to stammering and flushing and, at the very best, questions about the weather. "Do you think it's going to rain, Buttercup?" "I don't think so. The sky's blue." "Well, it might rain." "Yeah, suppose it might." "You think you're too good for anybody, don't you, Buttercup?" "What? No, I just don't think it's going to rain, that's all." Again, she's really bad at flirting. At night, more often than not, they would congregate in the dark beyond her window and laugh about her. She ignored them. Usually the laughter would give way to insult. She paid them no mind. If they grew too damaging, the farm boy handled things, emerging silently from his hovel, thrashing a few of them, sending them flying. She never failed to thank him when he did this. "As you wish," was all he ever answered. When she was almost 17, A man in a carriage came to town and watched as she rode for provisions. He was still there on her return, peering out. She paid him no mind, and indeed, by himself, he was not important. But he marked a turning point. Other men had gone out of their way to catch sight of her. Other men had even ridden 20 miles for the privilege, as this man had. The importance here is that this was the first rich man who had bothered to do so, the first noble. And it was this man, whose name is lost to antiquity, who mentioned Buttercup to the Count. The Count is going to be one of our next big characters. And yes, what they're describing is creepy. The fact that she's so hot that random guys would walk big distances, 20 miles, just to sit and stare at her as she walked by. And that's what this guy did, was rode to the village just to watch her go by. But apparently he was rich, and he starts telling other people, hey, there's this really hot girl in this town if you want to go over there and watch her. Yes, it's creepy. Uh-huh.
Julian.
Why is he talking about what? Miles Sheppa?
Why is it talking about miles when it's in Europe and they're building these models?
I have no idea. That is a
No,
solid question.
Because it took a while before they converted to.
Yeah, plus this was a long time ago, but I have
But
no
they
idea.
didn't use miles.
They're doing this
Yeah,
book.
but Britain was
Yeah.
the one
Well,
that
this is
created
a
the
rumor.
map.
There's also like
And then
oversized
created
motors.
the
Yeah,
map,
actually,
and they
like
spread that all around the world, and then eventually the rest of the world came.
Well, miles didn't.
I agree. If that is going to be a thing that bothers you, there's going to be a lot worse coming up in a moment.
points.
Three.
The land of Florin was set between. I think I have this up there too. Oh wait, there's the flirty bits.
Oh my goodness. I got you, but you have some stuff in your hair.
That's so nice of you. Way to make it weird. The land of Florin was set between where Sweden and Germany would eventually settle. This was before Europe. In theory, it was ruled by King Lothrin and his second wife, the Queen. But in fact, the king was barely hanging on, could only really tell day from night, and basically spent his time in muttering. He was very old, and every organ in his body had long since betrayed him, and most of his important decisions regarding Florin had a certain arbitrary quality that bothered many of the leading citizens. Prince Humperdinck actually ran things. If there had been a Europe, he would have been the most powerful man in it. Even as it was, nobody within 1,000 miles wanted to mess with him. The Count was Prince Humperdinck's only confidant. His last name was Rugen, but no one needed to use it. He was the only Count in the country, the title having been bestowed by the prince as a birthday present some years before. The happening taking place, naturally, at one of the Countess's parties. The Countess was considerably younger than her husband. All of her clothes came from Paris. This was after Paris. And she had superb taste. This was after taste, too, but only just. And since it was such a new thing, and since the Countess was the only lady in all Florin to possess it, is it any wonder she was the leading hostess of the land? Eventually, her passion for fabric and face paint caused her to settle permanently in Paris, where she ran the only salon of international consequence. For now, she busied herself with simply sleeping on silk, eating on gold, and being the single most feared and admired woman in Florini's history. If she had figure faults, her clothes concealed them. If her face was less than divine, it was hard to tell when she got done applying substances. This was before glamour, but if it hadn't been for ladies like the Countess, there would never have been a need for its invention. In sum, the Rugens were a couple of the week in Florin, and had been for many years. This next part is William Goldman interjecting. This is me, William Goldman. Okay, all abridging remarks and other comments will be in this fancy italic type, so you'll know. When I said at the start that I'd never read this book, that's true. My father read it to me, and I just quick skimmed along, crossing out whole sections when I did the abridging, leaving everything just as it was in the original Morgenstern. This chapter is totally intact. My intrusion here is because of the way Morgenstern uses parentheses. The copy editor at Harcourt kept filling the margins of the galley proofs with questions. How can it be before Europe, but after Paris? And how is it possible this happens before glamour, when glamour is an ancient concept? See, glamour in the Oxford English Dictionary. And eventually, I am going crazy. What am I to make of these parentheses? When does this book take place? I don't understand anything. Help! Denise, the copy editor, has done all of my books since Boys and Girls Together, and she'd never been as emotional in the margins with me before. I couldn't help her. Either Morgenstern meant them seriously, or he didn't. Or maybe he meant some of them seriously, and some others he didn't. But he never said which were the seriously ones. Or maybe it was just the author's way of telling the reader, stylistically, that this isn't real, it never happened. That's what I think. In spite of the fact that, if you read back into Florini's history, it did happen. Well, the facts, anyway. No one can say about the actual motivations. All I can suggest to you is, if the parentheses bug you, don't read them. I would recommend reading them because that's where a lot of his humor comes through, because it's where he makes fun of things. Remember, this is supposed to be like Shrek, where he's sort of making fun of things as he goes through. So he's taking out the whole idea of this royal family and then mocking them. Yes.
How does he have credit for this book?
Who? Because he's the one that, when we get farther in, they're going to talk about the fact that he's the one that made the reprint really popular. At the point when William Goldman redid it, this book was pretty much non-existent. No one cared about it anymore. Because it was like, I don't know, decades and decades, almost 100 years old. So he gets credit because he's the one that brought it back and made it super popular again.
How would S. Morgenstern feel about that?
But that's actually going to come up. That's part of the issue they're going to get into
Is
in
he
the
still
book.
alive?
No, he died a long time ago, but his heirs going to have issue. There's like a lawsuit that comes up.
Dino
Which,
ages ago.
Is
Dino
William
ages.
Goldman alive?
no, he died like 3 years ago,
Oh.
just recently. Quick, quick, come! Buttercup's father stood in his farmhouse, staring out the window. Why? This from the mother. She gave away nothing when it came to obedience. The father made a quick finger point. Look! Look, you know how. Buttercup's parents did not have exactly what you might call a happy marriage. All they ever dreamed of was leaving each other. Buttercup's father shrugged and went back to the window. Ah, he said after a while, and a little later again, ah. Buttercup's mother glanced up briefly from her cooking. Such riches, Buttercup's father said. Glorious! Buttercup's mother hesitated, then put her stew spoon down. This was after stew, but so's everything. When the first man first clambered from the slime, and made his first home on land, what he had for supper that first night was stew. The heart swells at the magnificence, Buttercup's father muttered very loudly. What exactly is it, dumpling? Buttercup's mother wanted to know.
Dumpling.
You know how, was all he replied. This was their 33rd spat of the day. This was long after spats, and he was behind 13 to 20, but he'd made up a lot of distance since lunch when it was 17 to 2 against him. We're going to find out that apparently Buttercup's parents, their way of showing love to their love language is fighting with each other. And they keep track of who's winning throughout the day and who's won the most fights. Donkey, I think that's an old Florida cuss word. Donkey, the mother said, and came over to the window. A moment later, she was going, ah, right along with them. They stood there, the two of them, tiny and odd. From setting the dinner table, Buttercup watched them. They must be going to meet Prince Humperdinck someplace, Buttercup's mother said. The father nodded. Hunting, that's what the prince does. How lucky we are to have seen them pass by, Buttercup's mother said, and she took her husband's hand. The old man nodded. Now I can die. She glanced at him. Don't. Her tone was surprisingly tender, and probably she sensed how important he really was to her, because when he did die 2 years further on, she went right after. And most of the people who knew her well agreed it was the sudden lack of opposition that undid her. Buttercup came close and stood behind them, staring over them, and soon she was gaping too, because the Count and Countess and all their pages and soldiers and servants and courtiers and champions and carriages were passing by the cart track at the front of the farm. The three stood in silence as the procession moved forward. Buttercup's father was a tiny mutt of a man who had always dreamed of living like the Count. He had once been 2 miles from where the Count and Prince had been hunting, and until this moment, that had been the high point of his life. He was a terrible farmer, and not much of a husband either. There wasn't really much in this world he excelled at, and he would never quite figure out how he happened to sire his daughter. But he knew, deep down, that it must have been some kind of wonderful mistake, the nature of which he had no intention of investigating. Buttercup's mother was a gnarled shrimp of a woman, thorny and worrying, who had always dreamed of somehow just once being popular, like the Countess was said to be. She was a terrible cook, and even more limited housekeeper. How Buttercup slid from her womb was, of course, beyond her, but she'd been there when it happened, and that was enough for her. Buttercup herself, standing half ahead over her parents, still holding the dinner dishes, still smelling of horse, only wished that the great procession wasn't quite so far away so that she could see if the Countess's clothes really were all that lovely. As if in answer to her request, the procession turned and began entering the farm. "Here?" Buttercup's father managed. "My God, why?" Buttercup's mother whirled on him. "Did you forget to pay your taxes?" This was after taxes, but everything is after taxes. Taxes were here even before stew. "Even if I did, they wouldn't need all that to collect them." And he gestured toward the front of his farm, where now the Count and Countess and all their pages and soldiers and servants and courtiers and champions and carriages were coming closer and closer. What could they want to ask me about? Go see, Buttercup's mother told him. You go, please? No, you, please? We'll both go." They both went, trembling. "Cows," the Count said when they reached his golden carriage. "I would like to talk about your cows." He spoke from inside, his dark face darkened by shadow. "My cows," Buttercup's father said. "Yes, you see, I'm thinking of starting a little dairy of my own, and since your cows are known throughout the land as being Florence' finest, I thought I might pry your secrets from you." "My cows," Buttercup's father managed to repeat, hoping he was not going mad, because the truth was, and he knew it well, he had terrible cows. For years, nothing but complaints from the people in the village. If anyone else had had milk to sell, he would have been out of business in a minute. Now granted, things had improved since the farm boy had come to slave for him. No question, the farm boy had certain skills, and the complaints were quite non-existent now, but that didn't make his the finest cows in Florence. Still, you didn't argue with the Count. Buttercup's father turned to his wife. "What would you say my secret is, my dear?" And there, we're going to stop before we get to his secret. By the way, he's not there for cows.
He's there for, yeah.
Buttercup.
For the girl.
He's there for the lady.
Well, I mean.
But it's going to get even more awkward because he brought his wife along to check out the girl.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a little weird. That's like
Yeah.
How do you know that?
And when I use the Countess's voice tomorrow, you guys are going to probably get creeped out
Oh, no.
again.
Oh,